Hi everyone, today we're going to learn 3.4, which is find and use slopes of lines. Slope. A slope is the slant or tilt of the line. Slope is represented by the letter m, and so our equation to find slope is m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Rise over run. So the difference of your y values divided by the difference of your x values. If we look at this diagram here, we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So to find the slope of a line, we need two coordinates, and we can plug these values into our equation to find the slope. You should remember this from Algebra 1, or at least be familiar with it. So let's find the slope between these two coordinates, -9, 10, and -2, -4. So let's remember that slope, which is m, is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Before I can plug my coordinates in, let's label our coordinates up top. So I have x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. All right, so y2 is -4 minus my y1, which is 10, divided by x2, which is -2, minus x1, which is also a -9. So I'm going to plug this in my calculator then. -4 minus 10 is -14, divided by -2 minus a -9. Remember, minus a negative becomes a positive. So this switches to a +7. And so what is -14 divided by 7? We end up getting -2, and that is our slope. All right, now I have a bunch of different lines here, and I want to determine which line has the following. How about a positive slope? A positive slope is a line that is increasing and going up. So that would be line K. A negative slope would be a line that is decreasing or going down. Which line would that be? Line J. A zero slope. A zero slope would be line L, which means it's not increasing or decreasing, it's staying the same. And an undefined slope, that means that slope does not exist, would be line N. These are the ones that I would definitely make sure you have in your notes because these are the uncommon ones. We don't see them very often. Positive and negative, you should be very familiar with. All right, so I have different lines here, and I want to find the slopes of all these lines. So here's my slope formula if you need this. All right, so let's look at line A, which is the blue line. My 2 points that they give us are that blue coordinate, which you see is 8, 2. And then if you look at this point here, 6, 4, that's also on the blue line, so I'm going to use that, 6, 4. All right, so let's label what we know. This is going to be x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to plug it in my slope formula, and I end up getting 4 minus 2 divided by 6 minus 8. All right, so 4 minus 2 is a +2, and 6 minus 8 is a -2. Therefore, my slope is -1. Let's try this again. Let's go to line B. Line B is the green line here. So a green coordinate I see is 4, 0. And once again, we're going to use 6, 4 because that point is on the green line. So 6, 4. So plugging this into my slope formula, I'm going to have 4 minus 0 over 6 minus 4. That will simplify to 4 divided by 2, which is +2. All right, line C. Line C is green here. So it's right here. I'll actually highlight it. So before we actually even do the slope, we see that this is a horizontal line. So right away, I know that my slope is going to be 0. So I actually don't even need to plug anything in. What's going to happen though is that if you do plug those coordinates into your slope formula, you're going to get 0. But once again, if you see a horizontal line, right away stop and say the slope is going to be 0. Same thing with our red line, line D. This is a vertical line, and so right away we know that this is going to be undefined. If we plug this into our slope formula, you're going to end up getting 4 divided by 0. And if you plug this in your calculator, you cannot divide by 0. So when you plug in your calculator, you're going to get an error. So anytime you see a vertical line, it's going to be undefined. Parallel lines. In a coordinate plane, two non-vertical lines are parallel if and only if they have the same slope. So this blue line and this red line have the same slope, therefore they are parallel. So for example, if the blue line had a slope of 5, the red line, actually I should probably say -5 since it is negative, it's going down. That would mean the red line would also have to have a slope of -5. Perpendicular lines. In the coordinate plane, two non-vertical lines are perpendicular if and only if their slopes are opposite reciprocals. Opposite means opposite signs, so one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and reciprocal just means the fraction flips. So for example, if we had 1/2, the reciprocal then would be 2/1. All right, so if we'll say the blue slope, let's say that was -5, that would mean that the red slope would have to be a positive 1/5. And this marking here is just saying if you multiply these two slopes together, you better get -1. And if you plug in -5 times 1/5 in your calculator, you do get -1. So that's just a great way to check that your slopes are indeed perpendicular. All right, next let's find the slopes of each line and then which lines are parallel. So let's start with the blue line. All right, so the coordinates on the blue line, I have -2, 4 and -3, 0. All right, so let's find the slope here. So m is equal to 0 minus 4 divided by -3 minus a -2. Okay, and when I plug this in, I end up getting -4 divided by, and I have -3 plus 2, because remember minus a negative is really plus, so that is -1. But that will simplify even more, and my slope is 4 for the blue line. Also, remember, if it's graphed here, we can actually count how many spaces we move up and over. So if I look at the graph, I move up 1, 2, 3, 4. That was a rise of 4. And I go over 1. Do you see how I got the same slope? So if it's graphed, you can actually count instead of doing your slope formula, but I think it's nice to kind of practice how to use the formula in case you don't have a graph in front of you. All right, next let's find the slope of the red line. So our two coordinates are 4, 5, and 3, 1. All right, so when I do the math here, my slope is equal to 1 minus 5 over 3 minus 4. 1 minus 5 is -4. 3 minus 4 is -1. So once again, I get a slope of 4. But if we wanted to look at our graph, I could have counted up 1, 2, 3, 4 to know I had a rise of 4 divided by a run of 1, which would have given me the same answer again. And the last line here, the green line, my coordinates are 6 and 3, 5 and -2. So my slope, I'm going to cheat this time. Instead of doing the slope formula, I'm just going to count. I count that I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means I have a rise of 5, and I go over 1. So my slope here is 5. Now remember, to determine if lines are parallel, they have to have the same slope. So which two lines are parallel? It would be the blue line and the red line. So blue and red are parallel. Those two lines mean parallel. That's an abbreviation. And the reason is because both of their slopes are equal to 4. So I could add these little arrows saying that those are parallel. The green line has a slope of 5, so it's not parallel. Even in the picture, it looks like it is parallel. We know it's not because that has a slope of 5, while the other two lines have a slope of 4. Here's our last problem. Line H passes through the point -1, -1, and 2, 0. We want to write an equation of a line that is perpendicular to H and that passes through the point 2, 5. This is our challenge problem. A lot going on here. So we have line H. I need to figure out what is the slope of line H. And so my first step is I need to find the slope between those 2 points. So here we go. So my slope is equal to 0 minus a -1 divided by, not divided by 2. So we just have 2 minus a -1. Okay. And that is equal to a +1 divided by -2 minus a -1, that's a 1, not an I, is a 3. So my slope of my original line, line H, is 1/3. The problem asked is I want to write an equation of a line that is perpendicular to line H. So if my slope for line H is 1/3, what would be a perpendicular line? What would the slope be? What would the opposite reciprocal be? And the answer is -3. So I'm going to highlight this and star this because I now know this is going to be my new slope of my new line that I'm going to write an equation for. So step 2 is saying now that we have our new slope for our new line, we want to write in our equation. Equations are written in the form y is equal to mx plus b. That is slope-intercept form. Where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept, where the line crosses the y-axis. This should look very familiar from last year. All right, so if I use the form y is equal to mx plus b, there's a few things that I can plug in this equation that I know. One thing is the m, my slope. Well, we figured out that my slope has to be -3. Now I'm going to scroll up a little bit because at the beginning it told me that my new line is going to pass through this point, 2, 5. That's going to give me my x and y values. So if I go back down to step 2, y will then be a 5, x is going to be a 2 plus b, and this is what I'm going to solve for. So here we go. So 5 is equal to -3 times 2 is -6. Oops. Oh, no. I'm sorry, my screen went a little crazy for a second. So -3 times 2 is -6 plus b. So next I'm going to add 6 to each side, so 11 is equal to b. So now I can rewrite my equation as y is equal to -3x plus 11. This is my final answer. So this line is parallel to my line H, but also goes through the point 5 or 2, 5. And that's it.